Big news in China, Qingdao port in the north part of China, missing aluminum and copper that was pledged for bank loans. Two of the banks that are in the process of trying to figure out what happened are CITIC Resources and Standard Chartered Bank. There are some links to the West as there are some investors that are involved in these contracts, but basically what happened is $50 million equivalent US of copper and aluminum were pledged as collateral for these bank loans through several different banks and some shadow lending. And somehow they've disappeared and nobody really knows what happened to them. And it's a giant Ponzi scheme. And in my opinion, there's many more like this. So let this be a lesson to anyone that's involved in ETFs or in other kinds of holdings that don't have any real backing or any opportunity for delivery on demand. That it's much deeper than just $50 million, and this is just one of the headlines in China. And there were many like this before, but this one affects so many different lenders, and they're still trying to make X and Y out of what happened. And I'm afraid that if we look in the bank vaults of many of the international banks and we look at the ports where they're supposedly holding metals throughout the world, you'll find that either they're not there or they've been pledged to many, many others. So beware and watch yourselves. Another terrorist attack in Xinjiang region in China where 13 attackers were shot dead. Police were minorly injured in the event, and this is just another in a long line of attacks coming out of that region and others. And we'll see more of this going forward, and the police in the area have ramped up. There's extra military, and papers are being checked as far east as the port in Hong Kong. So anyone that fits the profile of being from that region is getting checked once, twice, three times. I've seen them being checked in bus stations and metro stations. So that's the new policy in China, crackdown on any human traffic from the west of China.
And the news on terrorism in China, in Xinjiang, police shot dead 13 attackers, and they continue to try and crack down to the western region of China and calling them subversives or Islamic militants. And in addition to that, the government claims that 32 terrorist groups smashed in Xinjiang. Well, these 32 so-called terrorist groups smashed or arrested, but no trial, no proof of formal charges brought up against them. And the public never really gets any concrete information on exactly what kind of terrorist activity these so-called groups were involved in, and what was the process of gathering evidence, and is there anything that would allow them to have some kind of representation in China's kangaroo court system so that they can properly defend themselves if in fact there is some kind of mistake as to the identity or the activities of these groups of people. 380 people total. Gold. We already know that China is the #1 world consumer of gold and the #1 miner of gold worldwide in places such as Australia, Philippines, and many African nations. But what a lot of officials are concerned about now is smuggling of gold. In 2013, the official numbers for China importing gold is 1,066 metric tons. That is the official number. We know that the real numbers are much higher. Gold coming in by proxy in secret in not only ports at Hong Kong and in Shanghai and in north in Qingdao, but many other ports and to the west of China. The government, we believe, is secretly acquiring more gold off the books, so to speak, to keep their gold holdings a secret until they're ready to announce that. Well, smuggling gold through the west, profit margins increasing, so basically a lot of smugglers can earn up to 53,000 RMB bringing in 1 kilo of gold across areas near Tibet, Nepal, and so on. So the attractiveness for smuggling gold and other items is so great because the profit margins are so good. I think that one way that the Chinese government will combat this is being able to change the gold market and how gold is exchanged in Hong Kong and other areas. And that's one way that they can cut down on that is by changing the rules. Of course, whenever the government changes the rules in China, it has usually the opposite effect. So as the gold price rises again here in the second half of 2014, we'll see more and more purchasing of gold, more smuggling operations going on, and false numbers coming out of the government as to what the real amount of gold is coming in through the Guinness Book of World Records set. Guangzhou's Daming United Rubber Products Company snatched the Guinness Book of World Records for the thinnest latex condom on the market, beating out a Japanese company. 0.002 millimeters. And that's how thin it is. You can actually see through it. The company is now currently developing what is yet another great use of silver, the world's first silver nanoparticles coated condom to cut down on infection and other types of bacteria. These innovations and use of silver are very promising. Several years back I showed you a nanoparticles pillow and blanket that's currently being used in Korea. So the opportunities for the uses of silver are numerous and growing, and not just for investment, but actually in products that you would never consider silver to be used for. Province in China, guess what? This month, Man Bites Dog Festival, the world's largest dog meat festival. And there you see the hounds all hung up, ready to be butchered and cooked and served. I showed you a dog meat restaurant here several months back, but this is the world's first festival for dog meat. I wonder what they serve with the dog. Is there some kind of culinary pairing with salads and or drink, maybe a wine that goes good with dog? Who knows, but it's not something where I'm going to be traveling across China to attend, if you know what I mean. This is a map that could start a war, they say, all over the internet and in print. Chinese Shicoms in Beijing release a new map that shows more control and more territories in the South China Sea and East China Sea. This comes as no surprise, as there have been several maps drawn over the past several years which increase the territory of China not only to the eastern part of the waterways, but also in other regions to the south, to the northeast, and so on. The biggest, I guess, concern about this is that it takes the liberty of marking the pathways around the Paracel Islands as being part of Chinese territory. Well, what's key about this is that the maritime claims along here, about 80% or so of all trade through Asia comes through these waterways. There's also a Chinese oil rig site there. There's natural gas there. There's plenty of good fishing, and these waterways are very busy with products coming in and out of Asia. Vietnam is not happy about this. Of course, the Philippines already disappointed with this, and several other nations throughout Asia are of high concern with China's new map. The only question is how many more maps will the Chicoms release, and how much more territory will they claim is Chinese. Whether or not it has been throughout history is not in question. Currently, a lot of this space is either internationally known to be part of Vietnam, Philippines, Korea, Japan, etc. Yet some of it is international waters, which belongs to nobody. Either way, China is saying that all of it belongs to them, and this is the aims of Beijing, to eventually control all of it. Big news coming out of China and UK as China looks to exchange reserves of $4 trillion as of the end of May. And what to do with those exchange reserves? Well, they're going to partner up with the City of London to be able to trade the RMB and have a more open policy with it. $23.7 billion deal was signed with the City of London to be a hub for Chinese currency liberalization. This is one in several steps that are out there, including the free trade zone in Shanghai and other deals to make the yuan more convertible. Basically, like I said before, you all know this, all currencies are going down almost in unison. There is no good one out there of the ugly ducklings. So even though the yuan is gaining in strength and convertibility, it's still not a currency that you're going to want to save your money in. And I'll talk more about this as time
China
goes on.
state-run Bank of China set to add yuan clearing banks in Luxembourg and Paris. This coupled with the announcement to do so in London earlier in the month shows that the Chinese are moving more and more into getting the yuan to be set up to possibly challenge for world reserve currency. At the very least, what it's going to do is it's going to allow the Chinese to have more influence through
more media
banking
crackdowns
systems.
across China. There is no liberalization of free speech here, and the more they talk about loosening the regulations on free speech and activism, the more we see articles like this one. Critical reporting needs approval. Needs approval by whom? According to this article and many others that are in newspapers, in response to the Hong Kong protest for Tiananmen Square, they're reaffirming their policy that free speech does not apply in China, and that anybody that is willing to tell the truth on the internet or in print will be punished. And this, again, is not holding promise for many people that want to, invest in China, set up residence or business in China physically, or the Chinese nationals that are looking to move abroad and invest abroad. Without social constraints being lifted, all of the economic promise that the central government can provide will not be enough to satisfy a population that is growing in education and understanding of the world around them, and that desire to have better quality of life for their children, not just in education, but in social liberalization. There's a lot more to be said about this, but basically, as the economy has boomed over the past several decades, the social policies have not gone far enough. Home prices have taken a downturn in some markets across China as the housing bubble continues to unfold. 10 cities with the biggest price drop as of month on month: Hangzhou, Wuxi, Suzhou, Ningbo, and Tangshan in Jilin province. You can see month on month about 1.5% all the way down to 0.5%. I suspect that these numbers aren't exactly accurate, but what we're seeing is pockets of real estate changes. And although prices in the center of Beijing and Shanghai and so on are still rising, we're seeing weak housing reports coming from the second and third tier cities, which doesn't bode well for the people that have just bought a house recently, as the value of their property has now gone down with the cooling off period and will continue to go down. How about refinancing that home? Well, we're going to see a lot of reform, I believe, in the banking sector in China, and a lot of reforming on policies to do with and cartoon of the month here talks about Abe's international efforts to form anti-China alliance, and the Chinese are saying it is doomed to fail. Here's a photo of Abe with an anti-panda flag, and you can see the other Asian nations turning the other way. Well, one thing's for sure, Japanese companies are relocating to Southeast Asia and already cooling off their trade with the Chinese mainland. More Japanese companies are doing business in Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, etc., because the relationship is not good as we all know. And with more anti-China and anti-Japanese rhetoric, it's just going to encourage the growth in Southeast Asia, where both Chinese and Japanese companies are vying for cheap labor and a fairly good pool of manufacturing resources. China is not the only country that is investing heavily in Southeast Asia. United States, with the Asian pivot, is also trying to increase trade, especially with Vietnam recently, and we'll keep a close eye on that. Where do the manufacturing jobs go? China's consumerism grows even though there's a cooling off in the economy. We know that China is set to be the world's largest market for consumer goods, and this is certainly illustrated when we consider Tmall, which is similar to Amazon in the Western world. Here, by comparison, are the largest online retailers of electronics and other goods, Tmall being number one, followed by JD.com, Dangdong.com, Z.cn, which is Amazon Asia, VIP.com, YHD.com, and so on. And you can see the active users in millions, from 112 million, Q1 2014. And we'll see more competition there between these huge online dealers of electronics, clothing, and other goods. Very popular. You see JD.com trucks all over China, and these little delivery vans and carts as well. So they're doing very well despite the cool down in the economy, and the numbers should be quite good. Another area of social concern is human trafficking and organ trafficking. I told you this story a couple years back about a 17-year-old kid who sold his kidney for $3,500 US so he could buy an iPad and iPhone combo. All too real, these stories, and too numerous to explain. Human cattle profiting in people's pain. As of 2013, 382 babies were recovered in human trafficking violations. 301 suspects were arrested. 92 children and 2 women were saved. 200 Burmese victims enslaved in a Guangdong-based metal and paper factory for slave labor. There are probably many, many more. 37 the Chinese nationals suspected of human trafficking were sent home from Angola and other areas. 300 judges attended anti-trafficking seminars that are trying to update them on what the international laws are and the growing problem. $14,473 US equivalent is the amount a boy baby sells in China, according to Harvoscope, which is an agency that tracks this. A girl is usually $7,800 US, shipped in from Vietnam and other places. It's really a social problem that most people do not want to talk about. And there are too many more to mention. And finally, for those of you who are interested in unsolved mysteries and anything to do with gold, a subscriber had sent me this information on cryptograms on gold bars from China dating back from World War II, 1933 to be exact. These cryptograms on the gold bars discuss a transaction in excess of $300 million equivalent. And in 1930s money, that would be quite a bit more today in value. It's never really been solved or resolved as to who the transaction was with and why it took place, and where is the balance, and how did this thing get worked out. This is kind of related loosely to the Golden Lily treasure by the Japanese in the Philippines, and I posted some information on that on this channel before.